These disturbing images may be hard to watch, but there's no denying they make an impact on their viewer. This series of advertisements is part of a controversial American campaign aimed at highlighting the dangers of sharing a bed with your baby, or co-sleeping. Australia has seen its own controversy around the practice of co-sleeping after it was labelled as dangerous by Victorian coroner John Olley, who released a statement saying, "Caregiver and infant sharing of beds, sofas, mattresses and armchairs increases the risk of infant death from a fatal sleep accident and may increase the risk of infant death from SIDS." The coroner released that statement after ruling that co-sleeping was responsible for the deaths of at least 4 infants between the ages of 10 weeks and 5 months old. All 4 were the victims of sudden infant death syndrome, and all were in bed with at least one of their parents. Dr. Karen Waters is a SIDS researcher and the Conjoint Professor of Paediatrics at the University of Sydney. She says parents need to be aware of the risks of co-sleeping.
In terms of parents bed sharing with their infants and recommendations for sudden infant death syndrome, the recommendation is no, that the baby should be in a separate bed but in the parent's room. And that's particularly the case when the baby's less than 3 months of age, and particularly the case if the parents are smokers, or if they've had alcohol, or if they've had any drugs, whether those be prescription drugs or non-prescription drugs. And that's because of the risk of smothering the infant, and that in a parent's bed there's much higher risk of the infant having their face covered by bedding.
Mother of 2 Priscilla Bradshaw doesn't believe that co-sleeping is dangerous.
I don't agree with co-sleeping being a SIDS risk at all. I think that it actually lessens the risk, and especially with the research I've done too, that shows that mother and baby are in sync with each other, their breathing patterns, and you are aware. I've been aware with Dylan for the last 2 years, and I don't even have to really wake up. We're just aware of each other, aren't we? Mommy, yes, look.
She has co-slept with both her boys for the past few years. She tried using different sleeping methods with her older son Ashton, but stopped after finding that these techniques, such as controlled crying, were too stressful.
I just felt like it was natural when I had my first to do that, but then when I started going to the baby centres, they kept telling me it's not what you do. So I started questioning my own instincts, and they kept telling me you should be sleeping for longer periods and that sort of thing. So I ended up at Tresillian, where we did controlled crying, and that was so traumatic for both of us that I vowed never to do it again. So when I had Dylan, I knew, that at this time I wasn't going to listen to anybody else, and I was just going to follow my own instincts, and one of them was just sleeping with my kids.
Priscilla isn't alone in her instincts. Co-sleeping with children is considered the normal sleeping routine for a large proportion of the world, including Southern Europe, Asia, Africa, and Central and South America. Social anthropologist Dr. Rosanna Lilly believes that the Western practice of sleeping separately to your infant is in the minority of the world's sleeping habits.
So that when anthropologists have written about co-sleeping practices around the world, that they've been tending to focus on the idea that there's a kind of a divide between, if you like, Western cultures and the rest of the world, and that really it's only in Anglo cultures that there is a strong kind of notion that children ought to sleep separately from their parents. And in the main, anthropologists have related that to differences in cultural values, differences in notions of personhood, with a particular kind of stress on the idea that in Western culture we tend to value the idea of people as self-sufficient and independent, and that we have been training that from an early age in the past century. It's only really in the past 100 years that the idea of kids sleeping separately at all, whereas in most of the rest of the world, kids sleep with their parents.
While for some the debate continues, the official SIDS guide to safe sleeping for your baby is to sleep your baby on its back with its face and head uncovered. Ensure that the sleep environment is safe. Breastfeed if possible. Keep your home smoke-free. And sleep the baby in a cot in the parents' room. This has been Nina Young reporting for the M Word.